Gentlelady's time is reserved. The gentlelady from Connecticut is recognized.
Speaker, we have had 15 minutes to review a 71-page document, a document that was filed before midnight last night. There hasn't been any time for staff to review a 71-page document on such an important issue that we are facing. It demonstrates a lack of responsibility, a lack of a willingness to have a bipartisan agreement on a continuing resolution. I rise in strong opposition to the bill. The day before the government shuts down, and the majority is still throwing anything that they can at the wall to see if anything sticks. House Republicans have already proven that they cannot and they will not pass a continuing resolution on their own, even one with outlandish spending cuts that could never pass the Senate or be signed into law. A bipartisan, a bicameral solution is the only way forward. I worked on these efforts. And last December, and House Republicans at that time decided not to participate. But with the Senate Republicans, with Senator Shelby and Senator Leahy, we hammered out a budget for 2023. The Speaker knows the bipartisan Senate continuing resolution would easily garner a majority in this House of Representatives. Yet, he refuses to let it go to the floor of the House. What is he afraid of? So what are we trying instead? Well, yesterday, Republicans voted to defund our support for our allies in the Middle East, including a $1 billion cut to Israel, a further cut to Jordan. That did not work, so today the target is Ukraine. And despite the fact that it is the majority's will, demonstrated several times this week, to provide support for Ukraine's self-defense. The Biggs Amendment that would strike all Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative funds from the defense bill failed, 104 to 330. The Gates Amendment that would have prohibited all funding for Ukraine in the defense bill failed, 93 to 339. A Green Amendment to prohibit assistance to Ukraine in the State and Foreign Operations Bill failed, 90 to 342. And this body voted to separately fund Ukraine after it was stripped from the defense bill in the darkness of night, and that was 311 to 117. Mr. Speaker, the appeasement strategy of the far right does not have majority support in this body. Standing with our allies does have support here, which is tried and true American patriotism, American justice, Americans' view and their values for freedom and the fight for democracy. That's who we are. That's what we are about. And those who would do otherwise, shameful, shameful in bringing down the United States of America and its support for those people who seek freedom in our world today. The Department of Defense officials recently sent letters to the four corners of the Congress. Undersecretary McCord writes, and I quote, "Without additional funding now, we would have to delay or curtail assistance to meet Ukraine's urgent requirements, including for air defense and ammunition that are critical and urgent now as Russia prepares to conduct a winter offensive and continues its bombardment of Ukrainian cities, end quote. But then he continues, delays to additional funding would also be perceived by Ukraine as a sign of wavering U.S. support and likely a betrayal of our previous commitments. Allies and partners are also unlikely to sustain their increased level of support without clear, continuing U.S. leadership. As you know, Secretary Austin successfully engages over 50 nations every month to press for sustained support. It is crucial that the United States continues to lead this global coalition. Lead. The United States should lead. And we need the resources to underwrite our leadership role, end quote. House Republicans have shown that they are unwilling and they are unable to govern. Some have shown they are willing and they are able to abandon our allies. It is time for this body, for my Republican colleagues, to abandon the Gates strategy or the Green strategy and try, as we have in the past, for a bipartisan strategy that we all know will ultimately conclude the shutdown and fully fund the United States government. A shutdown will hurt families and farmers, children and service members at a time when families are living paycheck to paycheck. Let us keep the U.S. government open. Let us proceed with a bipartisan, bicameral agreement, and has been proposed by the United States Senate, and let us continue to support Ukraine's fight for freedom. Mr. Speaker, let's get to work. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentlelady's time is reserved. Gentlelady from Texas.
I yield to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Lawler, for 2 minutes.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Would the gentlelady from Connecticut yield for a question?
Yes, I'm happy to.
Thank you. Do you support the Senate version of a CR?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
Strongly support the Senate version.
Okay. So the difference between the Senate version and this version is that this version does not include Ukraine funding. So are you telling me that you would shut down the government if there's not Ukraine funding?
I might just say to you that, and maybe you have had the chance to read 71 pages. This bill doesn't extend the authority to help Ukrainian refugees.
Reclaiming my time.
Of course you'll reclaim your time.
Reclaiming my time.
Gentleman from New York
Thank you.
has the floor.
Today, on the last day before a potential government shutdown, Speaker McCarthy will be putting a 45-day clean CR with disaster relief on the floor. I will vote in support of this legislation so that we can keep the United States government funded and open while we finish our appropriations bills. Anyone, Democrats or Republicans who vote against a clean CR with disaster relief is voting to shut the government down. Whether it is Ukraine funding, securing the border, or reducing spending, all of which I support, it will have to be negotiated during the appropriations process. All of us have a responsibility to lead and to govern. In a divided government, none of us will get everything we want. To shut the government down would be disastrous for the American people, our military, and our economy. The time has come for everyone to put the American people above all interests and continue to do our work as responsible, reasonable, and serious legislators. For anyone to vote no on this bill, they are voting to shut the government down. And if you're saying that you support the Senate CR, but you don't support this one, the only difference is Ukraine. And if you're telling the American people with a straight face that you will shut the American government down over Ukraine, shame on you.
Gentleman's time has expired. Members are advised to direct their comments to the chair. Gentlelady from Connecticut.
I find it very strange indeed that there is no mention of several things, at least preliminarily, which we have looked at in this bill. There are many changes between this bill, as the gentleman asked me, and the Senate bill. There are many changes. The gentleman from New York should understand that there are many changes between this bill and the Senate bill. Here is one that I believe the majority will not mention. They amend the Senate bill to give themselves a pay raise. A pay raise. It's there. Yeah, you can look at me, you can smile, but what you did was you amended the Senate bill to give yourselves a pay raise, while you have threatened day in and day out service members, you have threatened workers across this country, and you've said to them, we don't really care about you and whether or not you can support your family. We don't care about that. No. We mainly care about ourselves and our pay raise. And you know, it pretty is true to form with what the American people thinks about members. But they should know which members are willing to give them up in their own self-interest for a pay raise. It is despicable. You are about to shut the government down. But hours before you do so, you give yourself a pay raise.
Will suspend.
It's pathetic.
Will suspend.
Yes.
The chair will remind the members in this chamber, as a matter of decorum, direct your comments to the chair.
Will do.
And heed the gavel. Gentlelady may resume. Gentlelady reserves.
I reserve.
Gentlelady from Texas.
I yield to the gentleman from New York, Mr. Molinaro, for 1 minute.
Gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
With hours to go before the potential shutdown of this federal government, we are posed with a single question. Vote yes to continue to provide services and support to our military, to our defense, to our communities, to law enforcement, or vote no and shut the government down. That's the question. And being told, by the way, for years that during the pandemic with the government shut down, that somehow people should just sort of fend for themselves, being told for years how great that was. We have an opportunity in this very moment to confront what is a real crisis for real people. Keep the government functioning. Continue to focus on appropriations. Drive down federal spending. But meet the needs and the expectations of the American people today. Vote yes to keep the government open. Vote no to shut the government down. I, on behalf of my constituents, will be voting yes to keep this government functioning. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady from Connecticut.
If I might, I'd like to read a letter that was sent by the Undersecretary of Defense, Michael McCord. And the letter was sent to the Speaker of the House as well as to the Senate majority and minority leaders, and it is just addressed to Leader Jeffries. I write to express the Department of Defense's deep concern with the absence of security assistance funding for Ukraine in the continuing resolution being considered in the House, or any similar continuing resolution that might be proposed. The Department of Defense is anxious to avoid a lapse in appropriations, but it is important that a CR protect our security interests and uphold our commitments and our values. As you know, the Department has been providing vital security assistance to Ukraine since Russia's unprovoked invasion in February 2022. Thanks to the bipartisan support of the Congress, it is just as vital today that we continue that support. Today, DoD has exhausted nearly all available security assistance funding for Ukraine. We are already out of funding for the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative, one of the 2 security assistance tools we have. The other funding tool we need are those funds provided to replenish our military's inventories for the weapons and supplies we provided to support Ukraine in their fight via drawdown. We have only $1.6 billion remaining of the $25.9 billion that the Congress has provided. We have already been forced to slow down the replenishment of our own forces to hedge against an uncertain funding future, our own forces. Failure to replenish our military services on a timely basis could harm our military's readiness. Without additional funding now, we would have to delay or curtail assistance to meet Ukraine's urgent requirements, including for air defense and ammunition, that are critical and urgent now as Russia prepares to conduct a winter offensive and continues its bombardment of Ukrainian cities. For example, a lack of USAI funding now will delay contracting actions that could negatively impact the Department's ability to purchase essential additional 150mm artillery and critical munitions essential for the success of Ukraine's armed forces. This ammunition is critical to sustaining Ukraine's armed forces, including for their ongoing counteroffensive. An inability to ensure timely procurement and deliveries could undermine essential Ukrainian operations to retake additional territory or defend against potential future Russian offensives. It would also affect our ability to support Ukraine's land forces, including obstacle breaching equipment, sustainment of previously provided small unmanned aerial systems, systems to detect, analyze, and locate adversary signals, and demolitions equipment. It would affect training, maintenance, and sustainment of the equipment we have previously provided, exportability efforts, spare parts, and other activities to ensure the Ukrainian armed forces receive a full capacity. A funding cutoff would also send a negative signal to our defense industrial base, which we have asked to step up munitions production across the country, resulting in increased defense capacity, and higher employment. We cannot afford to throw that progress away. In fact, we are counting on it to implement our national defense strategy. It is important to note that from workers supporting Stinger and AMR/AMM manufacturing in Arizona to factories producing components for Patriot, interceptors, and GMLRS in Arkansas, this funding is strengthening the American economy and creating hundreds of new American jobs. Some have suggested that the Department could still execute the mission and support Ukraine's needs if it were given permission to transfer funds from inside a short-term CR from our own needs to fund more security assistance. I want to be clear. The Department does not support that approach, which will create an unacceptable risk to us. Under a CR, the Department will be operating at a level approximately $25 billion below our budget request for fiscal year 2024, which was and is consistent with the Fiscal Responsibility Act of funding levels. The bottom line is we cannot sustain adequate levels of Ukraine assistance with transfer authority only. Delays to additional funding would also be perceived by Ukraine as a sign of wavering U.S. support and likely as a betrayal of our previous commitments. Allies and partners are also unlikely to sustain their increased level of support without clear, continuing U.S. leadership. As you know, Secretary Austin successfully engages over 50 nations every month to press for sustained support. It is crucial that the United States continues to lead this global coalition, and we need the resources to underwrite our leadership role. The Department appreciates your leadership on this vital matter, and I sent an identical letter to the Speaker of the House as well as Senate Majority and Minority Leaders Michael McCord, the Undersecretary for Defense. I reserve the balance of my time.